hope you're doing well. Some of you were with us this morning where we had an excellent masterclass with the maestro, Philip Smith, and had a really good time. So thanks for being here this afternoon. We have a fabulous guest this afternoon by the name of Dr. Stephen Cobb, and we're going to get to meet him and understand how his career panned out and what he's been up to recently, and some thoughts on brass band leadership. Because I know some of you are perhaps young leaders or aspiring leaders, and you want to know what it's all about and how to become a bandmaster and the things that you need to be mindful of. So great to see all of you. You made it back from lunch, and people will join us as we go, I'm sure. This is being recorded and will be available on YouTube this evening for those. So we have a number of students that are working and want to view this later on. So if you say anything, no cussing, please. Keep it clean. This will go live later on. Just a bit of housekeeping. If you could all mute your microphones, there will be a chance later on for you to ask any questions of Dr. Cobb, and I will call upon you when you raise your hand and you can speak. But for the time being, mute your mics. Otherwise, we have a situation very much like when I'm Zooming my mother and she doesn't know what's going on. So, and if you want to name yourself your real name, I see somebody called Patient, that might be your name, but good to see so many folk here on this call. I should also say that there are still private lesson slots available for this afternoon, for the rest of the week. So some outstanding teachers who are ready to give you a lesson. It's free, so take advantage of that, won't you? Because it'll be a great experience. We have Gary Fountain from the International Staff Band, who's teaching cornet, and various other folk that you would want to hook up with. So here we are talking about brass band leadership, and I see people who are already fantastic band masters. We have some veterans here. Great to see Derek Smith, the New York Staff Band bandmaster. Great to see you looking so well. And also Don Jenkins, who you might remember from Bristol Eastern Band, also Amsterdam Staff Band, looking after Enfield these days, I think. And he was also a TMI guest a few years ago, Don, and you played your trombone and we had a great time with you then. So great to see all of you. Well, I'm really excited. This first day of TMI, and of course we're all virtual, so it's all weird, and it's not like we normally meet together and have a good time, but it's really been a great start with Phil, and I'm really excited to have my friend on here, Dr. Stephen Cobb, and many of you will understand that Stephen runs the International Staff Band. He's the Territorial Music Secretary for the UK and Ireland Territory, and is really, to my mind, the gold standard in terms of bandmasters, and he leads the best Salvation Army band in the world, Derek, I'm afraid to say, and also one of the best brass bands in the world. So it's a real honor and a privilege to have Steve. How you doing, Steve? Are you muted? You may have been muted.
Somebody muted me. Yeah, I'm good, thanks, and it's good to be here. It's great to see so many people. Former staff bandsman Nathan Cole's here.
Yeah,
haven't seen Nathan for a little while, but it's great to see you, Nathan. But Derek, obviously, who we're in touch with most weeks, Derek Lance, and of course Derek Smith, who's part of our family at Hendon, really. And but great to see you all.
Great. Well, we appreciate you giving us a bit of your time, Steve. We know you're really busy, and let's get to know you a little bit. Why don't you tell us about life growing up as a Cobb and how you came to meet the Salvation Army?
Well, I was born into the Salvation Army, really. My family association with the Army goes back quite a while. My great-grandparents were pioneer Salvationists in Wimborne, in Dorset. My grandfather moved to Hendon in the early years of the 20th century. My grandmother was born and brought up in the Hendon area. My granddad was a long-term bandmaster at Hendon, 34 years. And growing up in the Salvation Army, I was on the back end of a 3-meeting, 3 open-air Sunday regime, which seemed pretty brutal then, but all these years on just seems insane. But that was our Sunday, 3 meetings, 3 open airs. And I was brought up, and it was Salvation Army, Salvation Army, Salvation Army. That's all that's all we had really growing up. I don't say that in a pathetic sort of way. It's just the way life was for my generation, really.
Yeah, I agree. And somehow we had a roast dinner in there, and then a beautiful spread at tea as well. I don't
Yeah,
know how we did it, really,
no.
but and you were probably at the core most nights of the week at various rehearsals.
Yeah, I'd have been at YP Band and Singing Company on the occasions when there was what we used to call a youth club. I would be down there for that as well. So yeah, it was army, army, army.
And then I suppose when you were 6 or 7, somebody put a cornet in your hand. Was that your father?
Yeah, when it came to playing, we there hadn't been a young people's band at the core for a little while, and we had a guy called Ray Northcott, who was a very good percussion player, who looked after the band for a little while. A fella called Tommy Wilson, who might be known to some of you, a really beautiful cornet player. He very briefly looked at the YP Band. And then one of my heroes, a fella called Alf Ringham, one of the most musical euphonium players I think I've ever heard, took over the YP Band and set the YP Band up. And I was part of that group. We were never a big band, but it seemed that everybody in the YP Band could play it, and I was part of that group. Alf very quickly relinquished the responsibility and passed it on to a military musician, a gentleman called Paul Piumata, who was the principal cornet player in the Welsh Guards band. And he really, he was the man who made the YP Band happen. He invested considerable amounts of time teaching some of the young kids, particularly the less able kids, to play way beyond what one would imagine was their capacity. And he did that. He was my band leader right the way through the time that I was in the YP Band.
It's interesting that YP bands, singing companies. I think they were so important to us growing up. They really gave us our formative music education. Less so at school. Really, we learnt our music at the army. You would say that was true for yourself?
To a large extent, yeah. Certainly in those early days, there was no instrumental teaching at school.
Yeah.
So it was army, and at that time the army just subliminally owned you. That's the way it was. There was that level of exclusivity that the army had, and we were. It seemed to me, even on reflection, it seemed to me that we were quite happy with that, really.
Yeah. And we heard a little bit from Phil this morning, Phil Smith, talking about learning from his father. And he really was so thrilled to talk about that. And everything that he learned in his career came really from his dad. What was your experience like learning from your father? Is that a pleasant one?
Well, it's interesting because some of you won't know this, but Derek Smith and Roland Cobb, perhaps two of the greatest cornet players that the Salvation Army has ever produced, both came out of Hendon. It was Derek's dad, Sid Smith, who was a lovely gentleman. He set up a YP band 2 or 3 generations before me that produced incredible players like Derek, like Roland Cobb, Don Morrison, the Morrison family, who were all really accomplished musicians. And it's kind of strange that Philip, who was born over here but moved to Canada and then America, Philip would be, I don't know, just a little bit ahead of me in terms of years, but had a very similar upbringing to me with a dad that played the cornet. My dad played the cornet, and I've told the story many times of literally going to bed every evening to the sound of my dad practicing. When I was a little bit older and he could trust my sense of rhythm, I would sit in the kitchen, and those of you who are cornet players and know the second variation of Wondrous Day with the triplets, my dad would say to me, right, this is the tempo, hold that tempo, and he would play and play and play that second variation with me just doing that, and he'd just say again, all right, and Thursday nights when Mum was at Songsters, I spent weeks and weeks and weeks doing that to try and help Dad play Wondrous Day. So that was how our house was, really. I would go to sleep hearing him play.
Now, some of us are fathers here, and we've experienced teaching our kids, and it's not always the greatest moments of our parenthood when we're trying to get our kids to play. But obviously, then you pass this on to your sons. Tell us a little bit about your family and your wife and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, my wife, Elaine, to whom I've been married a long time, works for the Salvation Army. She's Director of Older People Services for the Salvation Army over here. I can say it because it's true. She's an outstanding professional, and she's used by the government for advice on older people's issues. She's a specialist on dementia, and so she's often at the party conferences to speak into some of the groups there. She's a soldier at the Corps. She's actually a very musical lady too, a long-time songster pianist. She's walked away from that a little bit because of work, but when the Corps is short of a pianist, she'll get behind the piano again. And I have two sons, Matthew, who lives with his partner and has a 3-year-old daughter, Harper. And then I have another son, Philip, who's a professional trumpeter.
Tell us
Philip does army. Matthew doesn't.
So Philip just left his role in London Symphony Orchestra, and you must be very proud of the fact that he was principal and has now gone to the BBC, right? He
signed the contract with them 3 or 4 weeks ago now.
Yeah, that's great. You must be immensely proud of your both boys, really, because
I'm very proud of both my sons. They're good. They're good people. They're good human beings. They're humble, and I'm very proud of both of them.
I remember that your family coming to my corps at Chelmsford when they were very young, and both playing. Matthew playing beautifully, and I think you probably played a trio. Maybe Elaine was at the piano.
She would have been.
It was a good memory. Okay, so you were growing up in the YP band and eventually made it to this great Hendon Citadel band. Tell us a little bit about the band at Hendon, because we imagine this huge core band, but plays to a very, very high standard. Tell us about the setup at the core and what it's like to worship there each week.
Yeah, it's the tradition at Hendon is a quite a considerable one. On one of these conversations a few weeks ago, in fact it was only last week, in fact it was London North East, your old division. Somebody asked the question about how is it that Hendon still has, as we do, a band of 35, and I really don't know the answer to that. Perhaps it's that we've only had, is it 4 bandmasters, 5 bandmasters in a century? That might have something to do with it. I don't think it's got a great deal to do with one family having the job for a long time necessarily, but there is that tradition. It's at the moment we have about 35 in the band. Well, we did before the lockdown. It is, despite what some might say, it is a very inclusive group. So you have somebody like my son Philip, who plays the cornet well, and we have 1 or 2 that in another musical genre probably wouldn't be let loose behind a horn or a baritone or whatever. But they pitch up every week at the core. They're good people. They want to be in it. Therefore, they're in it. And so it's a very inclusive group. It is still an aspirational group. We still play good music. We may talk about this later, but it really is important that you provide good music for people in the band. So we would play. Well, I see Andrew's just pitched up. Andrew Wainwright's just pitched up for this. We would play his new piece, Facilibet. That's been a very, very popular piece for our core band and hundreds of bands around the world, I'm sure. But so we would we would look at that and really interrogate that score and make it work. So it's a very aspirational band, but it is, and I say this in a positive way, not in a negative way. It is an authentic Salvation Army core band.
Yeah, yeah. And one thing that you've always impressed upon me, Steve, is that you're really about the core. I mean, you direct these, you know, the international staff band, for goodness sake, but you're very much about the core and local. And I think that's very important for us to hear, because we all have these volunteer types, you know, that could barely blow their nose, let alone a cornet. But it's part of who we are, you know, and including those people. And it's part of the challenge of being a bandmaster is to, we don't all have Philip Cobb in our band, but deal with that kind of range of ability.
It's a really, I mean, that in itself, we could spend a whole hour discussing, because as I've said already tonight, I grew up in a Salvation Army where we were exclusively Salvation Army. We've come through all sorts of societal changes, and we're now in a Salvation Army where people have a degree of choice that was not mine, not available to me. We have all sorts of pickup groups, as I call them. So you can have a day away and some guy can conduct the band. He can conduct all his favorite pieces. He can be Billy Big Time for an hour and a half. Everybody thinks it's wonderful and all the rest of it. But actually that's not real. There's nothing wrong with it. And often they're fundraisers and it's great. But actually it is all about local. But doing local is tough.
Yeah.
It is really tough. And I can say, because I've done it for a long time, it is as challenging now as it's ever been. But it is all about local. Without that commitment, without that investment, without that taking a kid in the YP and teaching them every week, year in, year out, and seeing them go from a learners group into the band, which has been my privilege in recent days, and it's a really emotional experience to see one of your own kids coming through. But without that, your pickup bands and your staff bands, and it doesn't happen.
Yeah. Now,
so you know, we need the Sid Smiths, we need the Alf Ringhams and the Paul Pumatas, and for you, the Dave Haywoods to make it work.
Yeah. And so you're really busy at the core, growing up, coming through the senior band, and then you get an opportunity. Are we all the way back in 1975 to join the International Staff Band? You must have been 14 then or something. Tell us about that opportunity and how that came about.
Well, I was I'm probably more relaxed and chilled than I was. I think that's my perception of me anyhow. But when I was 16, the what's the word? The intensity, the focus was just playing the cornet. Now, unfortunately, I was never quite, and it was never quite good enough. But the focus to play the cornet well just completely consumed me. I was interested in sport. I was interested in all the stuff that, you know, young guys do, but actually overriding everything else, I desperately wanted to play the cornet well. So I was playing solos with Hendon. I was the principal cornet there. I was playing solos, and a vacancy came up for the staff band, and it's just a dream come true to be asked to join the band. And so it was such an exciting thing. Now some people here might think how sad, but I can only be honest, and I was absolutely thrilled to be appointed to the International Staff Band. It meant everything to me. Maybe it meant a bit too much, but it meant the world to me.
Yeah, no one thinks you're sad here. We're all band nerds. We get it, and I think we've all can put ourselves in that sort of position. And then for many years as principal cornet of the International Staff Band. And
my first rehearsal with the band was Ray Bowe's first rehearsal with the band. Okay. I never had the privilege of playing under Colonel Bernard Adams. So I was Ray Bowe's first signing, and I joined the band and sat number 3 on the solo cornet bench. And by 1978, I was appointed the principal cornet player.
Yeah. And what was the band like, or maybe what's it like today? The kind of esprit de corps, getting on a bus every month, going somewhere. What's that like? An international staff band as opposed to a core band.
Um, when I joined the band in 1975, 2/3 of the band worked for the Salvation Army. So they were either Salvation Army officers, or they worked in the accounts department, or worked at a bank, or worked at IHQ. And then there were about 5 of us, I think, that that were not in the Salvation Army's employ. And there was a bit of a hierarchy when I joined the band. And certainly, what was I, 20? Yeah, I was very young when I joined the band, and so you were definitely under no illusions that you were the new young kid and you just got on with your job and kept quiet and whatever. Now we're in a situation now where the world, you can't compare the world we live in now with how it was when I joined in 1975. And everything we touch in the Salvation Army is going to reflect how life is. So that has gone. That has gone in the staff band, and there is a much better understanding of inclusion in the band than existed when I first joined.
You would have had a lot of sort of officers playing second horn or second baritone, that type of thing back in the day, right? And now...
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you one example. He's gone to heaven now, but he wouldn't have minded me telling this story. We had a guy join the band. We lost our second baritone player, and we had a guy join the band, Captain, little fella, Captain Roy Smith. And he'd been, this will tell you how long ago it was, Nick. He'd been in Rhodesia, all right?
Yeah, Zimbabwe now. Yeah.
Yeah. And he'd been out there for 13 years. And he'd been brought back here for a job on IHQ. And he came back not having played for 13 years. Wow. And he had his grey overseas uniform, came back. He was appointed to the band. He hadn't asked to join the band. He'd been appointed to join the band, and he turned up for a lunchtime rehearsal, not having played for 13 years. And the band secretary gave him his second baritone and said, "Captain, you sit there." That's how it was.
Oh my God! Well, you can do that with second baritone, but well, that's amazing.
But that is a true story. Yeah. And we had. Now I joined the band, and there's some fantastic players. I mean, trombone player Gordon Hill was there on principal trombone player. He was an outstanding brass band trombone player, outstanding bass trombone player there. Right the way around the band, there were some terrific players, and yet you had these other lovely guys. And I learnt a lot from Roy Smith, being in the band. He had a very special ministry when he was in the band, but he couldn't play for toffee.
Now, eventually Bob Redhead took on the band, and really the army banding world changed around that time, and we were allowed to play outside music, and of course it was you and David Dawes always at the end, and then you kind of chose to take a back seat there and let David have his moment. How did that kind of happen, Steve? If you don't
well, I wish it was quite as straightforward as that. Again, Robert wouldn't mind me telling the story. I don't say this. I say it because it's true, not because I want anybody to say, "Oh no, it wasn't." But I wasn't good enough. And the harder I tried to play to the level I wanted, I just wasn't making any progress. And there was this young guy coming up, sitting number 2, just sensational player. Good guy, just had everything, and I was feeling this sense of I can't say it was pressure, but I just felt that I needed to do the right thing, and my boys were growing up, and so I made the decision to go and see Robert Now we were good friends. We were working in the department together. I was doing some part-time work there and teaching, and so we had a very good friendship. And I just knocked on his door. I said, "Have you got a minute, Robert?" Yeah, come in. So I said, "Look, I think I need to speak to you, and I think David and I need to swap chairs." And he looked at me as Robert does, and he said, "Oh, all right then." He didn't say to me, "Well, are you sure you're doing the right thing?" But Robert is just so transparent.
Yeah.
That okay, fair enough. So I thought, oh, you could have just said, "Are you sure?" But he didn't. So he said, "Okay, well, should we do it tonight then?" So I've been to see him at 4:00. And at 5:30, the decision had been made. Now, the caveat to that was that I was going to do a year in the band and then leave. Because I'd done 15, 16, so I'd done about 18 years in the band, which I thought was a good stint. So I was going to leave the band. But in the first instance, I said, I will give you a year, and I'll give David a year, and then I will withdraw from the band. So from the Wednesday of that evening, sort of 2 hours after I'd spoken to Robert, that's what happened. And I hated sitting number 2.
But you gave a wonderful testimony at my core about it. And so I know that it was an emotional thing for you, and I think a spiritual thing too, to make that switch.
It was.
Like you're just...
It's been said of me that I'm not an overtly spiritual man, and that might be true, but I am a spiritual man, and that decision was definitely of God. And there's no question that decision I made, and other decisions that I've made over the years that have been really, for me, brutal decisions, have been honoured. And that was definitely one of them. No question about that.
When you look back and you think about what transpired next, which was Robert was moved, and then they bring in the first non-officer bandmaster of the International Staff Band. How did that happen, Steve? And how did you feel?
Well, it was a shock. I mean, the truth is I was going to leave the band. Robert was going to be doing another 2 or 3 more years. He was going to do a 5-6 year stint with the band, but then he needed to get back to North America. And so by November of '93, Robert spoke to me in the authentic way that we had always talked to one another, and just said, "Look, I'm giving you a heads up here. I'm going back to Canada." And that's all he said. There was speculation over who was going to succeed Robert. Inevitably, it had always been an officer job. I didn't think for a second that the leadership at the time would change that stance, and I imagined it would be a Salvation Army officer that would succeed Robert. So it was quite a shock, and it was a monumental shock when I was sitting in a music council meeting at IHQ on a Wednesday afternoon, and the TC's private secretary asked for me to be released from that meeting to go and see the TC. And the TC was a commissioner, great fella, Dinsdale Pender. And I went into his office, and he said to me, "You're probably wondering why I'm wanting to see you at this time, Stephen." So I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well," and he asked me to take on the band. All my instincts were to say, "Yes, thank you so much." But the fact is, Elaine was aware of my decision to leave the band at the end of that season, and I couldn't have had more support than she'd given, really. And so I said, "Look, I really would like to speak to my wife about this." He said, "Oh, of course you must. So I said, "So I'll speak to Elaine." I said, when do you need to know?" He said, "Well, I've got a board at 3:00. If you could let me know by then." So I had less than half an hour to make a decision. So I phoned Elaine and she said, well, do you want to do it? So I said, yeah, I'd love to do it. She said, then you must do it. And that's how it happened. And again, it was announced to the band that evening.
Wow. And this will allow us to feel empathy for you, because I think we've all been in a position where we thought, oh my goodness, how am I going to do this? I mean, was there a part of you that was completely daunted by that prospect? Were you nervous?
Initially, it was just an adrenaline surge, the sheer excitement. I knew the band. I'd been in the band quite a while. So there was just this sheer excitement. Because my dad had been in the band as a kid. I went to all the big festivals, and it was part of me. So it was just a massive adrenaline thing. And then we went on holiday. We went down to Cornwall, and I've always slept very well. But we went down to Cornwall, and I woke up pretty much the same time for about 10 days, at about 2:30 in the morning, absolutely perspiring, and with this sheer terror about going back and doing the job. And I'd never experienced fear like that as a player. I'd never experienced fear like it in teaching, and I worked in some pretty tough schools. But there was this sheer terror. And I said to Elaine on holiday, I'm just going to have to go back and tell them I can't do this job. And I was quite serious. I just can't do it. And then one afternoon we went to a Cornish village, and there was a very, very old church right on the headland. And I felt drawn to this church. So I left Elaine and the boys in the town, and I went to this church. And it was quite a small church. I shut the door. There was a prayer room in the corner, and I shut that door. And the silence was really quite something. And I prayed, which is not the sort of thing I do a great deal on holiday, other than sort of the daily prayers. And I prayed, and I came out of that. I couldn't tell you what I prayed for, but I prayed, and I came out with a sense of, with a real sense of peace, and with a sense that I could go back and take this job on. Now that sounds really cheesy, but it is the truth. That was my experience. And so I went back to rehearsals in September. I had some difficult decisions to make with moving personnel, but what a strong position I was in, because 9 months before I had made the move. And that there wasn't one person that could argue with the move, because they'd seen what I'd done the year before. I had no idea at the time, but that's where God honoured my decision all those months before.
And for young bandmasters, YP band leaders on this call, I'm glad to hear you say that, because it is pretty daunting sometimes, particularly when you're starting out or you take on a new group. And it's not the easiest thing in the world being a bandmaster. I mean, there's the musical part of it. That's one thing, but there's a whole other side to being a leader, which we'll talk about in a moment. So you must pinch yourself every Wednesday evening, Steve, and think, my goodness, I'm conducting the international flipping staff band here with all these players. One of the best brass bands in the world, no question, and certainly the best Salvation Army brass band in the world. I mean, how does that make you feel, and how do you stay humble?
Well, the staff band, the ISB have never, and if Nathan's still here, I'm on an Apple screen, so I've only got 9 shots. I don't think the staff band has ever sort of preened itself and thought, yeah, we're this, that, the other. And I'm frankly not at all interested in all of that stuff. I'm very committed. I'm very competitive. I'm very passionate. But my passion is for us to be the best that we can be. In the same way that my passion is undiminished for the core band being the best that it can be. And I'm slightly troubled sometimes, and this might sound like I'm being critical of you, and I'm not being critical of you, but when I go and hear the London Symphony Orchestra play, or the New York Phil, or the Chicago Symphony, I don't go and think they're the best orchestra in the world, or they're whatever. But in brass bands, we seem to have this, he's the best cornet player. And actually, in the Salvation Army, we want hundreds of good cornet players. We want hundreds of good bands. So there's never been any of that. But there is something about those initials ISB, where there is an expectation that things are right. And that is still very evident in the band. It's certainly very evident in the way I approach the band. I've always said to myself, the second I walk up the stairs before rehearsal and don't feel anything, or there's no adrenaline, there's no kind of sense of energy for a Wednesday, that is the time when I need to move on. And that hasn't happened yet. So I could look anybody in the eye and say that even now, I would doubt there's anybody more enthusiastic about the staff band than I am. So it means a lot to me still.
Yeah.
Not from a personal perspective, but in a sense of wanting the band to be the very best that it can be. And I mean, this lockdown it's brutal. It's absolutely brutal.
I'm coughing, but I don't have COVID, I promise, and you can't catch it anyway. So let's get to some practicalities about being a leader. Before we do that, let me just remind people that at 3 o'clock today, we have Neil Smith talking about youth music groups. You won't want to miss that. And tomorrow morning at 11 is Boston Brass, followed by Bill Himes talking about worship planning at 1, and Ronnie Murchison talking about gospel choir leadership at 3. And I should also say to students here that there are still private lesson slots. If you want to sign up for a private lesson, you have that opportunity. Don't miss it. It's a great opportunity to have a lesson with a world star. All right, let's talk about being a bandmaster, and put yourself in maybe Hendon Corps Band. I'm your corps officer, Steve, heaven forbid, and I'd like you to play The Light of the World in 3 or 4 weeks. How do you approach that piece? What are you listening for, and how do you put that together?
Well, my approach to the corps band has changed. The technicality is that I'm not the bandmaster at Hendon. I did that for 29 years, and then I felt it was time to move on. For whatever reason, a couple of years later, I found myself looking after the band again, and I continue to do that. And I do that with my heart. It is a privilege to be a corps bandmaster. But I decided that I wanted to do the job in a different way. We have in the brass band culture a sort of repeat ethos. Rehearse, do it again, do it again, do it again. And attention to detail is really important. But what I wanted to do this time around was to try and trust the band a little bit more, rather than to micromanage the group. Now, you will understand with the upbringing that I've had with my dad. You know, when I was trying to play Happy Day as a kid, for example, I had to play that back to back twice for my dad, just to be fairly sure that even on a bad day, I would get through it and it would be okay. So that was my upbringing, and if I'm sure Derek Smith would probably that could well have been his methodology. I don't know what Philip said earlier, but it was play it twice, back to back, then you're in. So I wanted to do the corps band just a little bit different this time. We have a Salvation Army over here. When I grew up, I would do 48, 49 Sundays out of 52. Now, there are more attractions on a Sunday, so I normally get 28, 29 on a Sunday morning, but you don't often know who you've got. So I now talk to the band about Sunday ministry music, and I talk about building up a bank of music. So we will prepare a piece of music, and we will work on it in the same way that we would work on Present Age or the Holy War or Vassalabet. Or we would interrogate that music. We would understand what the music was trying to say, and then I will say to the band, right, that is ready. We will play that one Sunday soon. So we've got a bank there, and I've got a 3 series of Sunday repertoire. I've got a bank of Triumph series music that I can draw from, so that if we are particularly short on a Sunday, I can go to that. Right, we'll do that. So that's how I do it. Now we've got really good officers at our corps, and Major Mark Rose plays in the band. So I use that, and I hope in a good way he uses that too. And we will play a piece on a Tuesday evening, and I will often say to him, you could build a meeting around that.
Yeah.
So we had a situation a little while ago where we started to look at the Present Age again. We hadn't played it for some years, and Mark had never played this. And I had a lot of young kids in the band, so we went through it section by section, and I told the story of the Present Age, and I reflected that this piece was written all those years ago, but actually the story was as relevant now as it was in 1968 when it was written. So we took the group through that story, and on a first rehearsal I said, right, we'll play it down, and we did. It was we got away with it, actually. We got at the end of the meeting, at the end of the rehearsal rather, Mark said to me, he said, I'm really taken with that. We're going to do a meeting on that. He said, how soon could you get that ready for a Sunday morning at Hendon? So we agreed on 3 weeks, and 3 weeks later he built the whole meeting around that story, and we used that in the meeting.
Wow.
So and the feedback from the corps, from people that didn't know the piece, from the Auntie Flo's or Auntie Mary's, who weren't really music people or band people, they empathized with the piece because the story was just so overt.
Yeah.
So in terms of how I prepare for Sundays, my critics might say it's loose. I'm saying it's absolute. For me, it's perfect for the Salvation Army of now, where years ago, you'd practice a piece, Light of the World, and you'd play it, you'd get it to that point, and you'd turn up on a Sunday, and you got 3 people missing, and say, I can't, it's not going to be the way I made it sound. I'm trying to be pragmatic. I'm trying to lead in a way that is relevant to the 21st century Salvation Army. Does that answer your question? You're muted.
You're muted, Nick.
Hey, Nick, you're muted.
Thank you so much. I was coughing. Thanks, Andy. Steve, what I was saying was when we come back in September, let's pretend this lockdown isn't happening, and you've got your first rehearsal. What are some of the things that you're listening for when you come together? That first hymn tune, is it blend, balance, tone? What are you listening for?
When we come back, I think I will be crying with the sheer emotion of actually being back again. And I say that with a smile, but actually, some people might look at me and think, what's he doing? But I miss it so much. I miss making music so much. I miss the people at the corps so much. So when we get back, it will be very emotional. And I think the tears that will follow after that will be tears of, where the heck do I start with this? Because it's going to be ugly. It is going to be ugly. So I think, to answer the question a little bit more intelligently, I think once we come back, I think I need to understand the situation. So a lot of the guys will be very rusty. And I think that premise that some of the old time conductors would say, and I would subscribe to it, is that you do what you can with what you have in front of you. And I think that applies to the musical group you have in front of you, given the circumstances, given that they haven't played all of that time. So you want to start together, you want to stop together, you want it to be musical. You want, even if they're rusty, you're wanting them to shape a phrase. You're looking to make sure that they don't stop notes, that shorts are not, that notes are not excessively short, and you're looking for intonation. You're looking to damage limitation with some of the secondary parts when you know on the score that there's something exposed. You know that, I'm picking on the baritone again, but you know that there's a second baritone and a second trombone or first trombone doubled. So you're applying damage limitation from very early on, but you're wanting it always to be musical.
Yeah, and it's great that we have so many wonderful bandmasters on this call. I mean, I think of Don Jenkins, and to me, Don was an emotional leader. You could, he wore his heart on his sleeve when he was conducting, and you would feel that. And I think Derek always talks about the words, so important when producing music. It is an emotional experience, but there are many facets to being a bandmaster beyond the music. And I don't know if you can kind of deliver them by percentages, but you have the pastoral, the spiritual, the educational. How do you break up the role as bandmaster? Because it's more than music, isn't it, Steve?
Yeah, it is. I mean, music is an emotion, so that's one thing. Within the Salvation Army, nearly everything we play is word associated. And there was a time when I was a Salvation Army bandmaster where I resisted going with the words, but I'm over that phase, and I think we should celebrate the fact that we've got the words. I've taken in recent days to having my songbook with me on the stand.
Yeah.
And I will look at the words. I struggle a little bit with the technology now in the Salvation Army, and this probably is where I'm showing my age, but it's great having the words on the screen, and it means everybody's got their heads up. But sometimes, for me, you lose that opportunity to reflect on some fantastic prose. When you get onto verse 2 and you've got verse 2 up there, and sometimes I just want to stay with, wow, does she really mean that? And so I'm using the songbook a lot more, and we have that word association. As an aside, I made myself vulnerable at Territorial Youth Band in February this year, and we had 74 kids. We had our best take up for 15 years this year, with 22 newbies, and I spoke to them about the Salvation Army. I spoke to them about a few things, and I spoke to them about the songbook, and the fact that it was our book of common prayer. And they may not want to delve into the Bible and go through Genesis and whatever, but actually they could do worse at the end of the day to open the songbook, find a song, and they're their prayers. And I reflected to them how I was using the songbook as a core bandmaster. And at the end of the day, at the SPNS stand after the final concert, 5 of the kids bought a songbook.
Brilliant.
Which I thought was fantastic.
Yeah.
Now that might be my influence. I hope it wasn't my influence. I hope that it was something I said that they thought, yeah, he might be right. But we've got the words, and I think that's really important. But you've got the words, you've got the music. That is just a small part of being a Salvation Army choir bandmaster. My very first year at Tilney Hall, there was an old Salvation Army bandmaster there, a guy called Bram Williams, and he was the bandmaster at Birmingham Citadel. And he was quite old school, a bit contemporary of my dad's, maybe a little bit older, but he by his own admission wouldn't claim to be a fantastic musician, but he was a master of man management, and he did a leadership track at Tilney Hall, and he was brilliant. And during that week, as a 17-year-old, he exposed me to aspects of being a choir bandmaster to this day that I've never forgotten. That whole management of the group. And he said something about being aware of the mood of the band very, very early on in a rehearsal, and how you should be aware of that. Now we're going back 50 years here, and he was talking about man management. When I was 25 and was the bandmaster at Hendon as a very young guy, way too inexperienced, really. What he taught me then was really helpful. And I can tell you now, by 10 past, 8:15, I could tell you pretty much the sort of day every single one of my band has had. And I know, I'm very, very rarely wrong. I know the people that I need to just gently cajole, those who need a little bit more than that, those that I've got to smile at, those that I've got to snarl at. And I know that in a very short space of time, because Bram Williams, all those years ago, made me aware of the fact it's not just the music.
Yeah.
You know? And the other thing he said, you've got to remember that music's not everything to everybody in the band. For some of them, it's a hobby. For some of them, it's a night out. For some, it's their golf. So he said, you've got to be careful. You've got to understand that it's not necessarily their passion. You've got to get the result without it necessarily. You've got to understand this is not necessarily what they want to do.
I'm thinking about some of the people on this call that have a good functioning core band that have 16, 17-year-old kids coming through, people who are retired officers, people who can play, people who can't play. And just, you really are a shepherd for those people in a way. And you have to pick up the phone and listen to somebody's story about his prostate cancer and then kind of cajole a young person to stop being lazy and practice. And it really is much more than just the music. If I didn't.
I mean, the other thing he said to me that I've never forgotten, he said, when you look at your band, he said, crudely, you need to multiply every single member of your band by 4.
Yeah.
He said, because you could have a band of 30, 35, but that your principal cornet player has got a wife and 2 daughters. Your first horn player has got, and it made me think at the time. But actually, if you've got a band of 35 at your core, you've arguably got a congregation or a core community of 110, 115 quite easily.
Yeah.
So you don't want to disenfranchise anybody in the band. I mean, you're not going to pander to them, but you need to be aware that every time you make a decision, it's not just one person, it's potentially one family.
Yeah.
He that mindset he put into my head when I was very young, and I still think that his comments stand the test of time.
That's great, Steve. This is it's fascinating. We're going to go a few minutes more, maybe 15 more minutes, if you will, because it's just a gold mine hearing from the Yoda of Salvation Army Brass Band. And I'm sure people have questions rather than me. So if you want to show your video and raise your hand or unmute yourself, I know people out there like Timmy Burley or let's see who else. Steph Hall has probably got a question. If you've got a question, just raise your hand and I'll call upon you. And most of you are not showing yourself. Anybody? I see Nelson from Brazil. How you doing, Nelson? You okay? That's it. Great to see you. Anybody got a particular question they want to ask? You don't get Stephen Cobb on the phone every day. So this is the opportunity, friends, to ask. Maybe it's a situation where you're a leader and you need a bit of advice. Is there anybody out there? I'm going to pick on Matt Broom has a question. Matt.
Is always dangerous. Sure. What are your thoughts about this? I think this has come up on the timeline for later this week for our DMD talk or our commissioner talk. But what are your thoughts on the uniform in general? And as a bandsman, are you super strict with that? And then I guess the other side of that is as far as, and sorry, I joined this conversation late, so I don't know if you talked about this already, but using Salvation Army bands as an outreach. How strict are you on soldiership? When do they have to become a soldier? Do you have people that just play in the band for years and years without making that commitment?
Okay. Good to see you, Matt. Over here, the Salvation Army is changing dramatically. I mean, let's forget lockdown and all that stuff. And I don't want to pick on him at all, but I see Nathan here, and it really is. I'm thrilled to see Nathan here this evening for all sorts of reasons, but genuinely, it's really lovely to see you, Nathan. But Nathan, if he looked at the Salvation Army that he was in at Eastern, and the way the Salvation Army is 5 years on, 6 years on, he would notice a huge change in the Salvation Army. Now, he'll know a little bit about this because his brother's a Salvation Army officer and his mum and dad are still active. But even in that time, there's been a huge shift. And if I'm getting the temperature right, Matt, there is a move towards adherency, not soldiership. There is a move towards open groups, not suited and booted Salvation Army groups, which is difficult. When a Salvation Army group goes open, what do they wear? When a Salvation Army group goes open, how do we respect the longevity of a guy that's been in the band 30, 40, 50 years, for whom being a Salvation Army bandsman is something special and is something unique? The fact is, it's happening. And I think there are lots of positive ways in which we can embrace an open group. It would be foolhardy to approach it in a way where it was all about music. But at the same time, if music is the attraction, then we need to encourage people to come in. But if it was just to join a music club or a music society, then frankly, what would be the point? So I think, to answer your question, Matt, I can envisage uniform changing. I think whatever that looks like, I would want some sort of uniform, and I would want people to look right. I wouldn't want it to be slapdash. So I think uniform is going to change. I believe in our territory that music is still one of the most significant missional tools, one of the most significant missional opportunities that we have in the church. And I think we should do everything we can to use that as a medium to bring people within our core, within our church. I think we're still exploring over here how we might best do that. For me, at the moment at Hendon, we've got 35 in the band. I would be very happy to embrace us becoming an open group, because I think we could embrace it for all the right reasons. We would not need to be embracing it because we were short of players. And for me to be part of that fellowship of the band, I would hope that they would be people that would be attending the church and then transitioning into the band, and in an ideal world, making their way to become full-time soldiers. So I think that's the best way I can answer that question. I don't know whether you want to come back to me for something more specific.
That's good, Steve. Don't ever ask Matt to follow up. You never know what. I think these are the
Nick,
issues we're grappling with, aren't they? And how do we move forward? What about the health of brass banding in general? I mean, we've seen a bit of an uptick in North America in the 20 years or so I've been here. New groups starting, groups getting better. What's the health of brass banding across the world from your point of view, Steve?
Well, our most accomplished bands in the brass band movement play extraordinarily well, and there's no denying that they can play louder, quicker, higher, for longer than ever before. Whether they all possess that lyricism and that ability to make you cry, some might doubt that. I would kind of refute that, and I would blame the computer and the repertoire that they're expected to play. But that they play astonishingly well. I think outside that elite group of bands, there are a number of other very, very accomplished groups. I think if you go to the very best groups, they are all in the same boat of wanting players and having to get them from a larger distance than used to be the case. And I think that's partly because there are less players, and it's partly because our expectations and our aspirations are very, very high. So I would say that we are going to have real challenges over here with our education program because there are cuts happening. I think in the Salvation Army, the situation is a little less positive. The core band expression is very much under threat. I'm not going to sit here and gild the lily. I'm not going to lie to you. The core band expression is very much under threat. And there are a number of reasons for that, but we have a Salvation Army over here that is in numerical decline. Some would look at that very negatively. As a lifer, it disappoints me that we're losing people. I think I know why that is, and that I won't be drawn on this evening, but I think I know why that is. But I think if we have a Salvation Army that is in numerical decline, that is going to have an impact on our music program because there are less people. So there's nothing we can do that. But there are still in our territory some fantastic people. There are still some incredible musicians, and I have a real hope and optimism for the future. Partly because of the privilege of the job I have, where I get to see some of the hotspots. But there are some great kids around, and I've said it for a long time, but we've only got to hang on to half a generation of one kid, and we're absolutely back in business. I think you've heard me say that more than once.
Yeah.
We're back in business.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me at TYB this year, with all those young people there, they would have done anything. They're playing 6 hours a day. They're playing top pieces of music. They're worshipping well. The cell groups are vibrant and healthy. They're well-rounded young Salvation Army people. If we could just hang on to them, what a Salvation Army we'd have. And that keeps me going.
Yeah, we share that
keeps me going.
And we're in the same boat. We have some fantastic young people coming through. I have a great hope for the future, but I think you have to keep fighting for it, don't you? And I think your Territorial Youth Band's been a huge success in the UK.
Yeah.
It's been very encouraging. So, we still look to London a little bit in terms of the world, Salvation Army, to see what's happening, to see what the mood is, and we're grateful for what you're doing. I just want to give anybody an opportunity if they want to ask the great Stephen Cobb a question. I see Timmy Burley's on there. Timmy has a question, and now we're all going to hold our breath, wondering what he's going to say. Go, Timmy.
Well, your answer to the last question kind of had me thinking. So obviously, a lot of us here understand the value that the band plays in the core. How would you go about convincing some leaders in our local core that may not understand the value of?
My opening shot would be that with a music group such as a brass band, it's pretty much the ultimate group in so many ways. It's all age, it's inclusive, it's all ability. It can play inside, it can play outside. It can play everything from a very straightforward worship song, hymn, right the way through to 17, 18-minute major piece of music. It can play indoors, it can play outdoors. It's an incredible group. Now, I don't say that the Salvation Army Band is the answer to all the ills of the Salvation Army, and I'm certainly in a music program. It would be wrong if it was all about bands. It shouldn't be, and we've made the mistake over the years of being too band orientated. And we've got vocal, we've got the praise band, we've got so much going for us. But I don't think we have to have that or that. I think we can have it all. But in terms of speaking up for a brass band, that would be my starting ground.
Great, good question, Timmy. Well done. Anybody else with a question? I've seen Toby Gillam. Are you still awake? Good. Okay.
Nick, I've got a question. If you
go ahead,
slot it in. Yeah, Steve, it's great to see you again. And
thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing this. Just some thoughts on lockdown. We've had a lot of people that are now have been locked away for 3 or 4 months. Their routines have changed, their evening schedules have changed, their weekends have changed. And I think one of the battles that we're going to have as leaders is re-engaging people, particularly young people, into our programs. And on top of that, recruitment. The cores are changing, like you're talking about in the UK. We have a lot of small core here. Certainly in my division, we have small core. And it's how we go about recruiting and opening our doors and reaching out, that kind of outreach element that music-based is something that we can do, I think, particularly well. But how are you going to approach that when we actually get back to normal programming?
Well, locally, I'm dealing with it now. And with our band, Nathan, with the staff band, I'm phoning the band every week. So it takes the best part of a day, but I phone round every member of the band every week just to see how they're doing. And I mean, you know me from the good, the bad and the ugly with my leadership of the staff band because you were in it. But I would say proudly that I'm the most relational that I've ever been with the ISB. So I'm doing that every week to keep that link with the band, to keep the band connected to one another. We've got a WhatsApp group, but WhatsApp groups can get a bit silly and whatever. But I'm phoning them every week, and I've got to know the band in a way that, to my shame, that I haven't before. We have with the core band a weekly Zoom conversation, and we have a guest each week to our fellowship. We're getting most weeks something like 40 that come along there. We're having people that have never been to the Salvation Army before that are part of the Zoom conversation and are commenting on how warm and friendly everybody is. There's a guy in a local town band a little while ago who used to do Army, who in a very small and a very step-by-step way is reconnecting with the Salvation Army on the back of Zoom conversations. To be more specific about your question, when we come back in September, the 5 kids from the corps that I teach that I haven't spoken to for a little while, I'm going to embark on Zoom lessons with them, providing I can get all the safeguarding stuff sorted with them. So my way of doing it will be to try and engage with them using the technology we have, despite the challenges of virtual. There are good aspects to it. I think when we do come back, it could, as you know, it could go one of 2 ways. I'm choosing to take the really positive stance that people, when they come back, are going to be absolutely buzzing to get back and to do community, to actually play and make music together, to actually sing a song on a Sunday together. I am taking the positive view rather than the counter view, which is, well, look at myself. I've been going out with Elaine since she was 19. And this is the first time in our relationship that we've both been in 7 nights a week, week after week after week. Now, we both survived that. But there will be those that will be thinking, you know, I rather like this. I don't want to do it. But I think everybody's going to come back absolutely buzzing. And I think for the Salvation Army, it could be an incredible opportunity for us to reboot. I don't know whether I've answered your question specifically enough, but that's my view on it. And I think we need to be, the thing with the lockdown is it messes with your head. And I think there's a danger that we could, that our senses could be dulled and we could think that all is lost. I can't think that. I have to believe that this is a great opportunity for us, and I have to believe that people are going to be coming back, just almost knocking the doors down to get playing again. Sure. It's a sense. I definitely have that sense with our band, Nathan, that the guys are, you know, all the guys that come silly distances to be at rehearsal, they're all saying, "Oh, I'm missing it terribly." Had a great conversation with Gary. I'm so pleased you're using him this week. By the way, Nick, he'll be a great teacher. But Gary, who you know from your time in the band, Nathan, can have a bit of a sour face. But that's not the. He's a great character, and he can't wait to start up again. And I think once they know what that time is when they can come back, I'm sure they're going to be. But we need to have that head where we think this is a great opportunity. What can I do to absolutely nail these people?
And just Steve, sorry, Steve, just to ask about TYB. You said it's really successful and the kids are coming, and that's still a really good recruitment tool. So in terms of a territory or a division, trying to recruit into core, is there a way that you're kind of thinking, more local or regional way of trying to get kids into the army that aren't necessarily associated with families?
My private view, Nathan, is that we're not doing that as well as we could. But I've got a team of 7 regional specialists now who are closer to local. Not sure they're always given the scope to do that, but Dean Jones down in your neck of the woods is setting up a brass band, a community brass band program that is bringing new people in. Bedford Congress Hall are doing a band program, and they are bringing new people in. And there are other core expressions where that is happening. But as you will understand, and it's probably the case where you are too, we are dependent on that support from the corps officer to make things work. And not all corps officers have enjoyed the music tradition that you and I have experienced, but there is a change in attitude, and there is a way in which people are looking at music as a missional opportunity. So it's beginning to happen, but it's happening bottom up rather than top down.
Great, thanks, Nathan. Good question, and this has been really helpful. Okay, Steph, a quick one, and then I've got to move on. Go on, Steph.
So, Steve, what did you talk about in the beginning of this session?
Steph, you'll have to watch it back. All right, we're gonna put it up at 6 o'clock on our YouTube channel. All right, we're not gonna regurgitate everything, but it was all good. All right, so it's a good reminder. If you want to see this again or you want to share it with your friends, it's going to go up at 6 o'clock tonight on our YouTube channel. All right.
Yes.
You'd
That's
enjoy.
that's why I should have been at my job.
That's okay. We're glad you're here.
Thanks.
He was sleeping.
Nice joke. Nice joke, David.
Enjoy Steph in your band. He's a fine B flat bass player and a great character. Let me just do some quick fire questions for Steve. And Steve, you got 5 seconds to think about these answers, no more. And you're not having 5 answers either. It's going to be quick. Tell us your favorite composer in the Salvation Army this week.
This week, Les Condon.
What about your favorite march?
Praise.
Yeah, I love it. Meditation?
This week, Light of the World.
What about your favorite song in the songbook?
Blacklands. He giveth more strength.
Yeah. Don't think we used that one idea, but it's a beautiful tune. And what are your hobbies and interests away from music, Steve?
Sport and photography.
Sport and Arsenal, is that right? Steve's team didn't do very well. It's actually Andrew's team too, although I have to say they did better than my team. So listen, this has been fantastic and I've learned a lot and I've been inspired by what you've had to say, Steve. And I should say that Steve's a huge encouragement to me as someone just a little younger who's trying to do this job and all that entails. And let me say, young leaders, it's not easy. It's not easy leading. Sometimes it's a pretty lonely place. I think that Steve would agree to that. And Don and Derek and other people that lead groups feel it's sometimes a lonely experience, but it can be extremely rewarding. And it's all really about relationships and the music, the education, that's all good. But if we can bring some people into a knowledge of Jesus Christ, if we can have some community with people that maybe otherwise wouldn't have it, then we've done some good. And I thank Steve for his leadership over so many years. And we still look to you, Steve, for leadership around the world, frankly, in terms of music. So thanks for your time. What is for us this afternoon? I guess it's this evening over there. And really appreciate that. Any final thoughts from you, Steve?
No, just appreciate the opportunity of being here. Very happy memories of TMI. Been there twice.
Yeah.
And great experiences and have a real soft spot for TMI. But appreciated being here tonight.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Appreciate that. Well, folks, let's give Steve a hand. You can do that muted. That's right. Perfect. Oh, thumbs up from Phil Smith. You got a seal of approval there. Appreciate it. You found that button, Phil. Well done. And it's great to see you all. At 3 o'clock, we have Neil Smith talking about youth music groups, some real practical help there. And then tomorrow, Boston Brass and Bill Himes. And then I should say later in the week, we have John Lamb talking about leadership. And also Derek Lance at the end of the week will clean us up on Friday talking about brass band leadership. So thanks, everybody, for being here and appreciate you. Great to see Don Jenkins, Derek Smith, Phil Smith, and really appreciate Steve Cobb's time this afternoon. We'll see you at the next event. All right. See you, folks. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.